Hello, it's Rachel Castani, and I'm going to be talking about the early developmental survival strategy of compromised love and sexuality, or the love and sexuality survival style. So these people, they're highly energetic and attractive and successful. They're the doers, the winners, and the sports heroes, the cheerleaders, the actors and actresses. They're often the people who become the icons of our collective consciousness. But because they base their self-worth on looks and performance, their self-esteem is actually conditional. So underneath that beautiful, confident exterior, they feel highly flawed. So their core feeling or thought about themselves is there's something fundamentally flawed in me. And basically they were hurt very young, and they vowed that they'll never let anybody hurt them again. So this is a high energy survival style, and it develops around the issue of heartbreak, resulting from unacknowledged or rejected loving feelings towards the parents, especially the parent of the opposite sex. Because of the early heartbreak, they're maintaining for them to maintain a consistent love relationship as an adult is actually really difficult. Their developmental challenge is to integrate an open and loving heart with a vital sexuality. So what happens with this type of survival strategy is that when your heart's connected, you're not connected to your sexuality and your vitality. So you tend to love people in the way that you love your family, but you don't feel or maintain a sexual charge towards your lover. Or you can have sex with complete strangers, but not with the people that you love. So all human beings are actually hardwired to be loving and sexual. But these individuals who have significant developmental trauma in the earlier stages of development, such as connection, attunement to self, trust and autonomy, they don't move fully into this fifth stage of development. So there's two important times, as I said, in the development of their sexuality, survival style: 4 to 6 years and 11 to 15. So what we've got to understand is that in children, love and sexuality are integrated, and somewhere between 4 and 6, then children might start expressing their love for their parents in a sexual way. And if the parents at this stage recoil from their early expressions of sexuality, the child is basically forced to split off their sexuality. So sometimes parents actually shame or punish a child for their expressions of love if they're overtly sexual. Or they just recoil or withdraw when the child basically begins to explore their sexuality. The other important stage being the pubescent stage, how parents respond to the emerging expressions of youthful sexuality and desires to be attractive actually leaves quite a big imprint on us. So basically this type experienced rejection or wounding during the periods of sexual awakening. That's the basic problem. So their compromised core expression is I love you, basically because that I love you came with some sort of sexual expression, it was rejected. So they feel hurt, rejected, flawed, and they suspect that they're unloved and unlovable, and this might actually be unconscious in them. So one of the ways that they cope with that is to say, I'll never let anybody hurt me again. They tend to reject first before they get rejected. Their self-esteem is actually based on appearance or image, and they really pressure themselves to be perfect, seamless and flawless, and they're highly critical of themselves and others when they don't measure up to their own standards of perfection. So these perfectionistic, critical and impossibly high standards are really what's driving them and also causing them and their loved ones pain. They are actually continually orientated towards self-improvement in some form or another. They can be drawn to working out or plastic surgery or wanting to make their hard bodies even fitter. They actually mistake admiration for love. They have difficulty feeling the heart and sexual connection together. And they have a tendency to shut down sexually when the heart opens. So they can have difficulty maintaining relationships. They can sexually act out, or they can be moralistic and prim and proper. They're quite driven individuals. They've got quite black and white thinking as well, like right and wrong. And their orientation is very much towards doing so that they can avoid feeling and being. So sex is their primary way of being in touch with the body, and they can be very seductive and then rejecting. They base their sense of sexual desirability on their sexual conquests. So they're actually really afraid to open their heart. And you might hear them say, I'm not even sure I know what love is. They can be very competitive, and they really are afraid to surrender, and they have a difficulty allowing vulnerability, both theirs and possibly others, in their love relationships. I can actually really relate to this one, but I relate to it more in my past. There was a time when I was only engaging in sexual relationships with people who were nowhere near my heart connection, and I actually was consciously doing that, or semi-consciously doing that, as a strategy to keep my very vulnerable heart and emotions safe. Did it work? Well, no, not really, in the sense that my deepest heart's desire is for connection. So if I'm keeping my heart out of the equation, how can there be any connection? I actually perceive that this is really far more common than we actually like to think. So, often when we meet somebody, the sexual magnetism or the charge is quite high and quite strong, but as the relationship develops, we find that we're no longer, although we love the person, we're no longer sexually attracted towards them anymore. So there's two subtypes to this type. There's the romantic subtype, and this subtype, they idealize love and marriage, and they're open-hearted, but they're often actually disconnected from their sexuality, and they might even be terrified of it. So they have difficulty integrating a vital sexuality into their relationships. So in the early stage of relationships, this subtype can feel more sexual, but as the relationship deepens, the sexual feelings basically diminish. And there's the sexual subtype. So individuals who are the sexual subtype have the tendency towards seductive behavior as a way of making themselves desirable. So they also actually seek out attractive partners who will bolster their self-esteem because they can sort of bask in the reflected glow. They don't use their seductiveness for control, which is something that the compromised trust types do. I'll talk about that in another little video. They basically use their sexuality or their seductiveness as a way of avoiding intimacy, because they're really basically afraid of their vulnerable feelings, and they don't want to make themselves vulnerable. So they often have the feeling that they're not actually capable of loving. The sexual subtypes consider themselves sexually sophisticated, and sexual potency and performance is important to them, but they measure their performance on quantity rather than quality of sexual contact. So So their sexuality can actually be quite mechanical and disconnected. So there's often in relationship a period, the initially of intense sexual expression and sexuality, but as the possibility of the heart connection develops, the sexual charge diminishes and they find it impossible to actually have an open heart and be open-hearted with somebody and be sexual. So often these types might actually show up in therapy because they'll often go through quite a lot of relationships, or they may stay with one partner whom they love and have affairs. Yeah, so I don't know what it. I don't know. Yeah, I think that's it on this type really.